John, start off, I guess, talking about your relationship with Mr. Hilton. How did you meet him, and how did that kind of progress?
Right. I first met him about 10 years ago. He had responded to a help wanted ad placed in a local newspaper for a telemarketing position. And he came to the office to interview. He had experience working as a telemarketer for other siding companies, so in the same line of work, and he was hired at that point.
And then how did things go? Is that what he did for you the entire time? Was
Correct. All he ever did was office work for the first number of years. For approximately 5 years, he worked as a telemarketer. I had a office on Clairmont Rd, and that's primarily what was done there. I had a lot of telemarketers. A lot of them would come and go. It's a high turnover rate. He had a job to do. He did his job. I mean, there wasn't that much else to say about him. And then there was a period of time around 5 years ago where I ceased doing the telemarketing operations in that office building. At that time, he was looking for something else to do. He may have worked for another company for a short while. You know, bear in mind that I've had lots of employees that did this type of work over the years. But when I closed down that operation, he kind of went on his own and would do his own independent telemarketing and leafleting and that type of thing to try and generate business. So he worked in a different capacity, but he did continue to work over the next 5 years and generate business for my company.
But it was strictly an office kind of thing? Did he ever go out and do home?
Strictly in the office, unless maybe he was out possibly handing him or putting leaflets on mailboxes, that type of thing. But no, under no circumstances did he ever go to a customer's home or ever work on a customer's property. I'm aware of an article that was published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution yesterday, and there was an interview with one Robin McKinney of Snellville. She told lies. She made misstatements of fact, and basically slandered me and my company in that article. Unfortunately, I was out of town this past week, and I was never contacted before this story was printed. So today I'm trying to correct some of the errors that were made, and also answer questions that the public has about this heartless, vicious murderer, Gary Michael Hilton. So that's why I'm here. I've been talking a lot today, so excuse me if I have to drink some water every now and then.
You go ahead. Tell me about Hilton when he worked for you. For those 10 years, he was telemarketing, some in your office, some out of the office. What kind of guy was he?
Well, going back to what we were just discussing, what was printed in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution was that Gary Michael Hilton had actually performed work at this woman's home, and that is absolutely, unequivocally untrue, period, end of question. He never, ever, as long as he had anything to do with me or my company, performed work of any sort like that on a customer's property. I don't believe he would have even known how to construct a deck or do any other type of carpentry work. So I wanted to clear the air on that first to make sure that the public knows that this person was not visiting my customer's house and putting anyone in danger.
What kind of character was he? Did you ever anything ever unusual about him the whole time he was working?
I would best describe him as being unconventional, in the sense that when I first met him, he was a 50-year-old man. He said he basically had no family. He had a dog, a large dog, and he said that was his only family. He could only work and live in places that would allow him to bring the dog with him because they never left each other. So, you know, I'm a dog lover myself. I've always known dogs, and so I somewhat sympathized with his predicament and helped to accommodate him where he could take his dog to work and do his job, and he did that.
So you ever have problems with him during that time?
No, for the first number of years, I don't really recall any problems at all. I know that he didn't interact well with others on a personal basis, although he was a talkative person on the telephone. In person with strangers, I would notice that he would be awkward and uncomfortable. And I think I could best describe him as somewhat of a loner who didn't really prefer to be around other people all that much. But nothing in his history that would have led you to believe he would be a violent person, certainly not to the extent of the horrible, vicious crime that he has committed. There's nothing I can point to over this 10-year period. However, I have to back up and go back to the past year, because the past year is when things seemed to change. About a year ago, he was not doing his job. He wasn't working. He was becoming more withdrawn, more difficult to talk to. He complained of being ill quite often. He told other people he was ill, that he even had MS, which I don't believe there was ever any clinical diagnosis of such. I think these are just stories he would tell people, whether real or not. I don't know, but I know that he wasn't working, and he still needed and wanted money simply to survive. So I helped him out the best I could. But as time passed on into the summer, things were just getting worse, not better. He still wasn't working, and it got to the point where he was demanding money, not just asking for it. Even though at that point I had probably advanced him in the neighborhood of $10,000, he demanded more. It got to the point where I told him that there was to be no more. He wasn't working. I had been discussing this with him for several months now, and he wasn't doing anything about it, and that he was going to have to move on. And at that point, he told me he wanted $10,000, period. He said, "I don't care how you get it, but you better give it to me or else." He said, "I'd take half now and I can get the rest later." But he said it would be the easy thing to do, or else I would pay the price. And he made no mistake, and I could see from the tone of his voice that he was in a state I had never seen him before, and I became very concerned.
Was this summer of 2007 or 6?
2007. That was this past summer.
Just this past summer,
yes.
Not even a year ago.
Not even a year ago, right. Like I said, he started behaving oddly and talking about his illness the first part about a year ago. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, things went on through the summer to the point where it came to a head where he basically threatened to kill me unless I gave him $10,000. And I was very concerned, as I just said. I contacted local police authorities and filed a report there and told them basically what I've just told you. Yeah. The Fulton County Police told me that based on what I told them, and I also let them listen to several voicemails that he had left on my cell phone that clearly demonstrated his unpredictable state. I let them listen to that. They heard my story. I told them I seriously thought this man was a danger, that people may be at risk. I may well be at risk. And at the end of my interview there, they basically told me that all they could do was fill out a report for harassing phone calls. And then they gave me a pamphlet about a victim's assistance center I could visit. I was also told that a detective would be contacting me to follow up after reading the report. Well, no one ever called back. No one ever followed up. So I was basically left to my own devices. And that very day that I contacted the authorities, I called Hilton back. He wouldn't accept the call. He just let it go to voicemail. And I let him know that I had been in contact with the police. And he had previously threatened me that if I went to the police, he would take action. So when that happened, I basically had to get family members out of the house, and I armed myself and remained armed 24/7 from that day forward until he was captured. And I took extra security measures around my house. This is how seriously I took his threats. And as the days passed, and I heard nothing from him, saw nothing of him, and had no idea of his whereabouts, I guess my comfort level grew a little bit, but I still remained looking over my shoulder until the day he was captured.
I understood you took out a restraining order as well?
No, I did not. I never took out a restraining order. They told me I couldn't do that at the police station that day. And here again, they told me to wait on a detective to call, but they were quite honest and saying there's really nothing we can do for you.
Except file the harassing phone calls charge.
Right.
Did that ever go through?
File for harassing phone calls?
Mm-hmm.
No. No, there was nothing that ever happened after that visit.
So that, did they suggest you take out a report or file the charges, or was that up to them?
They didn't really make that clear, but I knew in my own mind taking out some sort of charge for harassing phone calls would be simply just a waste of time. They wouldn't do anything about it, and clearly no one ever did anything about it. So here again, I did what I felt I needed to do to protect myself, and waited out and see if he showed up, and he did not.
And what month was that, do you think?
This was the beginning of September.
September of September 2007. Okay, so you didn't hear from him after that until?
That's correct.
Thursday, last.
I had absolutely no contact with him after that date that I filed the police report. The next thing I knew was on January the 3rd, I woke up and for some reason turned on CNN late in the morning, which I typically don't do. It's almost as though it was a divine intervention, because as soon as I turned on the television, the news story appeared that described this monster in detail. And when they mentioned the name of the dog, I believe they said Dandy, but I knew that was, I believe they said Randy, and I knew that was very similar to the name Dandy. All the pieces came together, and my heart literally sank to my stomach, and I thought, oh my God, this must be Gary. So I immediately contacted the authorities. I had to look up their number in Union County. I called the sheriff of Union County first and told them that I knew who this person of interest is. I was 99.9% certain that I had the information they needed, and they were very happy to hear from me. So I was able to give them his full name. I gave them the description of his vehicle. I gave them the tag number, and everything else I could think of. I gave them all that information. Shortly after that phone call, I believe the GBI started calling me within a few minutes, and they seemed very appreciative of the information I was giving them, and wanted to know if it'd be okay to continue to contact me. I said, of course. They said, if you hear anything else or you think of anything else, let us know. So I tried to salvage what I had left of the day. I was quite disturbed by what I was hearing. Of course, at this point, he was still just a person they wanted to take in for questioning. Well, about 4 or 5 hours later in that afternoon, I was out on business, and I got a phone call, and the person on the other end just started talking, and after just a few seconds, to my shock, I realized it was Hilton. Excuse me for a second. Drink of water. My mouth is very dry.
So he calls you that same day and hit you call the authorities later that day. He calls you. So you called them in the morning. About what time did he call you?
Like I said, it was about 4 or 5 hours later. I'm thinking I called the authorities around 11 in the morning, and it must have been sometime around 4 o'clock when I got his phone call. When he called me, he seemed very calm. He acted as though nothing had happened, nothing was wrong. He told me that he was ready to come back to work.